London, spring 1483. A black barge moves along the Thames, beside timber-bird wharves and the pale stone of the Tower. Inside the barge sits a boy of 12 in a mourning cloak, Edward, the new king. Oars bite the river while church bells roll over the city. Market stalls spill cabbages and eels onto wet boards. Armour clinks under canvas. The death of Edward IV has turned the capital into a whispering court, where every doorway hides a listener. On the north road from Ludlow rides Richard, Duke of Gloucester, lean in the saddle, banners snapping over a column of men. With him travel messages that strike like warrants. At Stony Stratford, he arrests the boy King's Woodville kin, including Earl Rivers and Thomas Grey. Saddles creak. Pages stare at the ground. The king's small retinue falls silent as carts turn toward London under watch. The language is custody, not ceremony, and every guildmaster in the city hears it by nightfall. The Tower of London waits at the bend of the river, a royal palace as well as a prison. Its inner ward holds chambers hung with tapestries, a chapel with candle smoke, and a council room where ambition takes notes. The boy is lodged there for safety in the tradition of Edward looks out through lattice windows at water that never stops moving. His 9-year-old brother, Richard of Shrewsbury, plays with a carved lion, then watches it scrape across the floor as servants hurry past. The city keeps its eyes on those windows, counting the days to a coronation that drifts like a barge on a changing tide. At Westminster, the prince's mother, Elizabeth Woodville, takes sanctuary with her daughters. She kneels on stone and clutches letters, while the sound of soldiers echoes outside the nave. Sanctuary is law, but it is also a plea. The protector controls the streets. Work on coronation banners slows, while rumors multiply. The mint tests dies for a boy king who may not sit. In council, Lord Hastings speaks bluntly against the Woodvilles and for the protector, then loses his head in the Tower yard after a single explosive session. The headsman wipes his blade on straw while a murmuring crowd steps back from the block. A legal instrument called titulus regius moves through clerks' hands. It claims that Edward IV's marriage was void due to a pre-contract, which makes all his children bastards and unfit to inherit. Seals crack, new seals drop. The plot of state shifts with each dollop of wax. The protector steps into kingship as Richard III, and civic pageants try to make that feel normal with banners, trumpets, and ale. Yet every London voice returns to the same question. What of the princes in the Tower? People swear they saw the boys at a window in June. People swear they did not see them in July. The scaffold timbers dry. The river keeps its own counsel. Foreign observers copy news into letters. Italian merchants listen in. Clerics record whisper and fact without assigning blame. Inside the fortress, torches spit resin along the wall walk. A warder carries keys that shine like wet bone. 2 boys sleep in a chamber meant for heirs, and the door to that chamber begins to close to more than drafts. The city's bakers rise before dawn, and no one can say with certainty who now orders the guards outside that door. A kingdom narrows to 2 beds, and the shifting step of shadow at the foot of the stairs. Follow motive, means, and moment. Richard has the clearest motive. 2 living heirs make his crown a wager. He has the means, since the princes lie inside his fortress with his officers. The moment is sharp, because rebellion brews as fast as harvest ale. Courtiers weigh loyalty against survival, while men in parish yards talk around bonfires. The logic feels simple. The uncle removes the nephews. The throne settles. But history rarely grants simple. Years later, a statesman named Thomas More, writes the tale many still know. He places Sir James Tyrrell at the centre, a hard tool of power. Under Tyrrell's authority, two men enter the boys' chamber at night, smother the princes with feather pillows, remove the bodies, and hide them within the tower. More writes under Tudor rule and from hearsay, but his prose sticks like pitch. Shakespeare turns it into poetry that crowns the image in English memory. The figure who limps across the stage, charming and cruel, becomes the shorthand for guilt, and the two muffled children become a nation's permanent shiver. The record under that story is called a no-signed confession survives. Tyrrell dies for treason years after Richard's fall, not formally for murder. Names like Dighton and Forrest appear in sources that mix politics and recollection. Even so, the disappearance itself is a confession of sorts. If the princes had lived, Richard could have shown them from a balcony and ended the rumors. He never does. He stages pageantry, grants offices, and rides to the north to put down trouble. The summer shrinks to a point that cannot be reopened. In October 1483, Buckingham's rebellion rises against Richard. The rain does not stop. Bridges wash out. Letters arrive late. Men who should meet do not. The conspiracy collapses under weather and fear, and Buckingham dies in public, with his hair blown flat by wind. None of that answers the chamber in the tower. It only proves how useful a rumor can be. If the princes are thought dead at Richard's order, rebellion gains purpose. If they are living and hidden, rebellion claims rescue. The same whisper serves every ambition. Turn the lantern toward forensics. In 1674, workers clearing a stair in the White Tower find a wooden box with small bones inside. The court orders a royal burial. An urn appears in Westminster Abbey with an inscription that reads like a verdict. The remains are examined in the 1930s and judged consistent with children of the right ages. But consistent with never means proved to be. Requests for DNA testing surface centuries later, and the Abbey declines, citing respect for the dead and the limits of what testing could show. The case circles back to paper, motive, and silence. Richard falls at Bosworth in 1485, face down in churned mud. His crown found in a hawthorn bush and placed on the head of Henry Tudor. That image is ritual and symbol. The new king marries Elizabeth of York, the prince's sister, to knit warring lines together. He repeals the statute that branded Edward IV's children bastards in order to strengthen his own line through his queen. The law changes again. The story changes again. The tower keeps its doors and its memories. Watch Henry VII's first years as if you were an anxious clerk with ink-stained fingers. If either prince lives, Henry's claim weakens. Pretenders arrive right on cue. In 1487, a boy named Lambert Simnel is put forward as the Earl of Warwick. He gains noble backing, lands in Ireland, and rides into England under banners that claim Yorkist blood. At Stoke Field, Henry's army tears that bid to pieces. Simnel ends up in the royal kitchens, turning a spit, which is mercy and theatre at once. In the 1490s, a figure named Perkin Warbeck claims to be Richard, the younger prince who escaped. He speaks foreign tongues and moves through courts with polished grace. He wins the protection of Margaret of Burgundy, an aunt to the missing boys, and finds support from kings eager to hurt the Tudors without paying for an army. Warbeck lands, flees, lands again, and finally breaks under custody. He confesses on a scaffold and dies. To Tudor loyalists, he is a cunning fraud. To skeptics, he is a man who sounded a lot like someone raised among princes and taught to survive by people who knew the stakes. Henry's government never publishes a definitive inquiry into the prince's fate. It repeals the Yorkist law that legitimized Richard's claim, suppresses copies, and rules by success rather than paperwork. If Richard killed the boys, why not put a neat rope around that fact and display it? If Henry bears any part of the blame, why not bury all traces and pretend the question never existed? The first option seems obvious and goes unused. The second option seems brutal and offers no proof either. We are left with a pair of missing children, two regimes who profited from murk, and a country that learned to live with uncertainty because commerce and crops cannot wait for perfect answers. Quick note for viewers who want more clear, sourced storytelling on unsolved history. Subscribe, leave a comment with the theory you find most convincing, and watch through to the end. It helps the channel reach more people who love careful narratives over easy myths. Return to the river at night. Picture the White Tower rising above the ward, the moon on slate, the hiss of pitch torches along the wall. A guard passes with keys that knock against chain. In some versions of the story, he knows exactly what happened and will never speak it. In other versions, he knows only that an order came down and that orders keep food on his family's table. History often lives in that space between obedience and knowledge. That is where power prefers its servants to stand. Modern debate pulls on three threads at once. The first thread is Richard as murderer. He had opportunity, a sharpened motive, and a narrow window before rebellion hardened. He failed to display the boys to kill the rumor. His rule never escaped the gravity of that silence. The second thread is Henry as cleaner of messes. He had every incentive to keep the question foggy, because a definitive answer might undercut his own story or reveal that at least one prince survived into his reign. He benefited from time and from a theater of confessions that never quite turned into documents. The third thread is survival, a possibility that refuses to die because Warbeck's career has the weight of money, ships, and treaties behind it, not just gossip. The bones in the abbey sit like a locked cabinet in a detective's office. Open the cabinet and you may learn little and wound respect for the dead. Leave the cabinet closed and you grant politics the last word. Even perfect DNA would not reveal cause of death, identity of killers, or the full chain of custody that moved any remains from a chamber to a stair void. The tower is an organism with 1,000 hollows. Workers in 1674 found one box. We do not know how many boxes were made or moved during centuries of repairs. Walk the actual site to understand the logic of fear. The palace apartments inside the inner ward give a child views of moat and courtyard, of archers on duty, of a river gate that allows a small boat to enter without crossing the city. A protector with control of that space can stage care or stage a disappearance without a public scene. A later king with control of the same space can permit or deny searches and ceremonies that fix a narrative. The stone tells you how easy it is to act and how hard it is to prove. The most honest conclusion is disciplined uncertainty. Richard looks guilty because his interests align with the disappearance and because he never raised the shutters to show the boys alive. Henry looks complicit in murk because his policies value stability over truth, because rebels wore royal masks, and because his government never pinned down the past in a way that outlived propaganda. Survival stories endure because displaced people carry skills, languages, and scar tissue that can mimic or match princes, and because exiles love a banner that promises restoration. End with a present-day mirror. In any age, power writes plaques, directs processions, and decides who gets a tomb with an inscription that sounds like a verdict. Media upgrades the megaphone, but not the instinct. The princes in the tower remind us to ask hard questions about sources, to separate theatre from testimony, and to notice whose voice is missing from the record. 2 children disappeared in a palace that doubled as a prison, and the winners of a civil war taught a nation how to remember them. The task for us is not to pick the most satisfying villain, but to show our work, accept the gaps, and guard against the next neat story that flatters the throne more than the truth.